Are you in or out? Several games will let us know in the college football playoff race, and there are rakes to be stepped on and avoided everywhere. This is the College Game Day podcast for Friday, November 10th. Rece Davis, Pete Thamel, Stanford Steve here, ready to make some fearless picks. Stanford Steve, how did things go on the fridge Saturday?
As they normally do, Reese, 2-2. We are holding steady. But this podcast, we're doing excellent.
You're tearing it up on this podcast. More volume. More volume is giving you.
I just got to have Jimmy G just tell me who he wants to pick. That's one I might do this week. Just tell me the games you want picks for. That way I don't
Maybe
have.
Maybe they can build a graphic underneath your name, Steve, that says
probably not
Picks on College Game Day podcast,
yeah,
and put that record in there. And it'd be good cross promotion to get some more downloads for Taylor.
I'll try and mention it.
Yeah, mention the podcast, but we're accepting no caveats like that. What goes on TV is a paramount.
No excuses here.
By the way, Steve, before we make picks and have Taylor go down the line, did you get some of those Baumhauer wings last Saturday from Tuscaloosa, or any of the meat? Or I took a giant spoon and just ate right out of the vat of gumbo. It was amazing.
I am really upset that I've never been there before. Like that's an automatic. That's the best food, I believe, in my short time on the show that we've had brought to the set. And I will, next time to Tuscaloosa, I will be going right there. That food is incredible. It
is elite level, but it's like a cut above bar food. It's like a different level of them. And I fall into the trap because I know people aren't going to believe this, but our friend Jess Sims, New York City, bastion of great restaurants. She validated what I believe Chuck's Fish in Tuscaloosa is the best sushi I've ever had. And Jess said the same thing. She was confounded and astounded. So I wind up going there because it's one of my favorite restaurants anyway. It's right there with Campagnola on the Upper East Side, New York City, which is the best Italian restaurant I've ever been to, and Limoncello in Boston, which is right there with it, and Chuck's Fish right there too. But Baumhauer's, sometimes you got to go for the other food. It was amazing on Saturday.
No doubt. And then I also got my first taste of pastalaya, which is jambalaya with no rice except bow ties at an LSU tailgate. Wow.
Ooh.
That was spectacular. Might have had 2 bowls. And it was served to me. It was served to me literally with a shovel. That's how they do it in Baton Rouge. It was phenomenal.
I would eat that.
Yeah.
I love jambalaya. I love Cajun cuisine anyway. Pete, do you have anything?
Chuck's Fish was the lead. I ate with Sims there the Thursday night we were there. They were kind enough to flip around games for me, which can be a little bit annoying sometimes. But yeah, the food was unbelievable. Michelle Rosenhaus, our intrepid producer, had a bunch of sushi and I sampled some. It was excellent. I'm not even like sophisticated enough to like claim it's the best sushi I've ever had because I wouldn't know what was second, but it was really a great meal and just a great night. The service was awesome. The people were awesome. A lot of like fans of the show, people coming over wanting to chat about this and that. So it was a great Thursday night in Tuscaloosa. And I did have multiple of those Baumgauer wings. Usually I'm not around when the food pops up, but they dropped them off at the audio tent with Jason Levin and the boys. And I had one because I wanted to try it. And I had 4 within like 30 seconds. They were awesome chicken wings. Like some of the best I've ever eaten.
And most of our listeners will know that Baumhauer is indeed Bob Baumhauer, the great former Miami Dolphins defensive lineman who was an All-American at Alabama and just all around great guy. Bob actually came up on stage helping serve the food, so it was great to see him.
I met Bob. He has the old D lineman meat hook hands.
I was gonna say I don't want that man's hands on me, boy. Woo, those are real.
I wasn't going to arm wrestle Bob. I'll tell you that.
No. All-time great guy and great player. And now can't wait to get to Athens Town this week because I love to jump up when they hunker down. That's an old school Georgia song. I love to see the red coat spelled in the name. I love to talk about the Georgia Bulldog things. But we're going to talk about a whole lot of other things now, making some picks. Taylor, let's get started. make some winning picks. Give us the records where we stand and what work needs to be done to try to reel in Stanford Steve.
Well, everyone I think had their best week in week 10. Steve went 8-2, Rece 7-3, Pete 6-5. There was a push in there with Iowa Northwestern. Pete is just, or Steve, excuse me, is slowly inflating my my gambling account, which has just been incredible. The overall results, Steve is 16 games over 500. I don't know why you aren't like putting this on Billboard, Steve, why you're not screaming it on SportsCenter with Scott, making him pump up your picks on the podcast. It's something special's cooking over here, I have to say. All right, let's get to the games, and we're going to pick this first one here just because it's Sarah Abbott not on the podcast here today, but Maryland, a 2.5-point favorite, headed to Nebraska. That kicks off at 12 p.m. Eastern time, the College Game Day podcast producer bowl. Let's go Rece, Steve, and then Pete.
My good friend, David Pollack, is going to laugh at me if he hears this because he knows of my belief and affinity for Talia Tagovailoa, who I like the fact that there's a little bit of a reckless edge to the way he plays. I like the bravado, the willing to turn the ball loose in any circumstances. He's going to be shocked that I'm going against them. But and my good friend Scott Van Pelt, who loves the Terps, bemoaning some of their recent fate in text back and forth about the fact that the snake pit is not quite as venomous as one had suspected. For this particular team, I've lost faith in picking Maryland. I still believe Mike Loxley. I still believe they can eventually improve and take it to the next level. They've got to avoid these trap games that they fall into, like Northwestern. I'm going to go with Rule and the fellas at home getting a field goal. You're basically picking the winner when it's a field goal. So I'm going to go with Nebraska despite their poor performance on Saturday. I'm going to go with Nebraska at home.
Yeah, it's been unfortunate what's happened to Maryland before the Penn State game. Double-digit 14-point favorites in 2 games. You'll lose both on the field. It seems to be unraveling. And when you look ahead, it's Michigan and it's Rutgers, and they're going to be underdogs in that game. I don't think they should be favored in this game, so I'm going to take the home dog here with Nebraska.
Well, I guess agreeing with you guys, since you're so much ahead of me, probably is a wise proposition. So I really like Nebraska's secondary. I feel like the corners are, one of the strengths of that program right now. And Maryland has a little bit of that Pepto pick feel, where if I picked them and they were down, shut out in the first half, I'd just be like, oh, why did I pick that sort of flailing, sputtering unit that's sort of doing their traditional end of season dive. Sorry, Taylor, but you've lived it a few times. So I am on hunch and instinct going to take Nebraska with a few points to ride this out.
I made a lot of money betting on Penn State last weekend. It was, way to soften the blow.
So, Taylor, what are you doing now? Are you going to bet against Maryland or on Maryland as a result of all of us picking Nebraska?
Oof. I was ready to go all in on Nebraska, but I might have to rethink that strategy after all of this. Let's go to Michigan, a 4.5-point favorite, headed to Penn State. That game kicks off at 12 p.m. Eastern. Let's go Steve, Pete, and then Rece.
I'm doing it. I'm taking Penn State. I've watched Michigan. We've waited all this time to see the true test, and when I watch them, that offensive line is not what Michigan has had. And you guys touched on it a little bit in the ranking show, Rece, with the idea of Georgia and Michigan and the idea of what they are and what they are in the rankings and the idea of what we've seen from them in the past. And it shouldn't be a factor, but it's hard. When you look at what this team has done, what they've built up, what they have bringing back, but that offensive line is not what they've had in years prior, and I think they're going to have their hands full. I'm going to take Penn State.
There's a bit of a Pepto feel to this pick because picking Penn State would mean you're picking against sort of the big game James Franklin's lack of history of winning big games, and I am just going to wait to believe it to see it. I think Penn State can win. I don't think they will. I don't think there's anything empirically right now that shows that they can go out muscle Michigan, because that's really what you would have to do. It would be kind of a sumo type game, and I don't think they have the ability to throw down field. No James Franklin press conference, pun intended there. And I don't think they have played the caliber of offense that Michigan has. So I am going to take Michigan, and we'll take Ohio State in this until proven otherwise. I hope it's a great game. I think it's a great game. I wish it was a night game, because I think that would sort of even things out a little bit. But I'm going to roll with the victors.
In the preseason, I had Michigan as a preseason number 1 team. I thought them to be the best team. Steve, I do agree with you, but I think that about the offensive line, but I think the bar is pretty high relative to what they've had the last couple of years. Mm-hmm. So it may not be that, but it's plenty good enough. And the real question with Michigan to me is, do the external factors get to them? And if so, when? It won't be this week. It's too early in the process. I think it's still a galvanizing thing. I agree 100%. Until I see Penn State make some big plays on offense, I'm going to need to see it. I do think that Manny Diaz and the defense will cause some disruption for the Michigan offense. But I'm taking Michigan and laying the points because I'm not convinced Penn State, barring kick returns, blocked kicks, pick sixes, scoops and scores, can get enough points on the board to win the game or stay close enough. So I'm gonna take the maize and blue to sort of break this trend of what if the Big Three and the Big Ten East, if they all just win their home games, which is still on the table for Penn State, but I'm saying it comes to an end Saturday and Michigan wins and covers.
What unbelievable theater we're just hurtling towards right now, by the way. For Michigan, Ohio State to end this year with everything swirling, with how much they hate each other, with the losing streak for Ohio State, with the vitriol in that rivalry at some kind of. I mean, it is amazing theater.
You know what would add to it, Pete? I really think adding to that would be a Penn State victory on Saturday, because then it sort of becomes all or nothing for both of them. Now, I don't know where the fifth tiebreaker stands at the moment, but at last check, when we looked at it before, meaning a 3-way tie, it would favor Penn State. So you could have an all or nothing feel with everybody watching the results in the West and still needing to win your own game, for Michigan or Ohio State avoiding losing it. It would be tremendous theater, but it still will be if they are also the 2 undefeated teams standing.
How many points would you need to take Penn State?
8.
Okay. I was going to say 9.
I thought that's what the line was going to be. That's another reason I'm sort of taking Penn State too, is I thought it would be more than a touchdown, and it's not.
I love the gamblers who are like, Vegas knows something. There's voodoo in the line. That's one of my favorite gambler things, because it's usually right, but it's just fascinating.
And that tiebreaker, Rece, like, I would guess is going to be heavily dependent on Iowa.
It
Penn State played them.
It was based on the Iowa-Wisconsin game when I referenced it earlier in the season, because we were bringing some importance to the Iowa-Wisconsin game as to how it went. But Iowa won, and they're still on top of the heap, as it were, in the Big Ten West. So I assume that still helps. But I think there are also some records below that come into play as well. And we don't have to worry about it until we get to the potential for the 3-way tie, but it is something to at least be alerted to. And what Pete referenced about the fishiness in the line, one of my favorite Lee Corso lines of all time when he's making picks. Somebody knows something, and I'm going with the somebodies. When he picks with a fishy line, somebody knows something, and I'm going with the somebodies.
Track meet Alabama, a 10.5-point favorite at Kentucky. This game kicks off at noon Eastern. Let's go Pete, Rece, and then Steve.
So this game has some slogginess feel to it, right? Like, I don't think Kentucky's going to score a ton of points. I also don't think Alabama's going to run roughshod on the road on Kentucky's very good defense the way they did to LSU's not very good defense. So I'm going to take the 10 here, and I'm going to think that the tide is due for a bit of a letdown. I'm going to take the Stanford Steve needle thread here. I don't think Alabama's going to lose this game, but I like Kentucky starting 10.5 up in it to hold on.
I tend to agree with you. I think with a noon start, 11 body clock time for Alabama, coming off what is always an emotional game against LSU under any circumstance, but particularly this year, having lost to them a year ago. Nick always gets pretty wound up for that particular game, even if he tries to downplay it a little bit. There's going to be a little bit of an emotional hangover feel, and I wouldn't be surprised even if Kentucky, jumps up 7 or 10 to nothing, but ultimately not quite enough points. I can see a 27-14 type of game, 30-16, 17, something in that along those lines, and that means an Alabama cover. So I'm going to go with not a sloppy, but a sluggish is the right word. A sluggish. Are they going to cover? Are they not? Is Kentucky getting in the back door? Will they not? I'm going to go with that kind of cover for Alabama.
I'm going to take Kentucky. You mentioned the body clock deal, Rece. There was a lot put in to that win over LSU. And when you look at this matchup, Kentucky's not going to be as chaotic on defense. They're going to sit back. You could obviously see there were some keys to Milroe taking off when he was in the pocket, whether it was what LSU was doing or what his guys were doing. But Kentucky's going to be way more buttoned up, and I still think the idea of how this doesn't happen a lot and Alabama coming to your town is enough to get an A1 effort out of Kentucky. So I expect the Wildcats to keep it close.
Taylor, bet your 401k on the Tide.
We'll let you know how it goes. There's not a lot in there. Let's go to
take out a loan.
Miami at Florida State. Florida State, a 14.5-point favorite at home. This game kicks off at 3:30 p.m. Eastern. We'll go Rece, Steve, and then Pete.
There's enough battered and bruised nature going on with the Seminoles to have some concern, although I think they're going to be a little bit closer to full strength this week. Miami is perplexing, but there's just something, maybe it's the rivalry, maybe it's the feeling that Miami better do something or this is going to be another disappointing season for them, even though they are improved over Mario Cristobal's first year. I do worry very much that Tyler Van Dyke will give the Seminoles a couple of easy ones, and this cover is going to be easy because I believe Florida State, far superior team. I believe Florida State can win the national championship, but there's just a little bit in my gut that tells me take the 2 touchdowns and the bonus hook for Miami at least not to get blown out. So I'm gonna take Miami in the points, thread the needle as it were. I do think Florida State wins the game. I don't think there's any question about that. But I'm going to take the points that they keep it that they have enough around to keep it close enough.
Totally agree on all fronts. I just feel like there's a extra special effort in Miami, and I think Florida State gets that, and I think it helps them down the road. But Florida State wins, Miami covers.
Vehemently disagree. Tyler Van Dyke seemingly is about to be benched. No one has said that explicitly, but no one has said he's going to start, which is not a good sign for an offense that has been sputtering. Yeah, I guess to follow up, since I got the wow from Steve, is that there's been silence on whether or not they're going to do that, and there's been a lot of like fish and cut bait conversations. When do you make a move conversations, which is crazy to think. One of the biggest stories of this offseason was Alabama's alleged courtship of Tyler Van Dyke. Like, he was thought of as one of the best returning quarterbacks in the country. There's been some injuries certainly that have slowed him down, but there's some lukewarm feelings at the very least. Mario Cristobal, quote, "I wouldn't use this forum to discuss a personnel move, especially at that position, because it affects so many things." So read into that what you may, but there's reading that there could be some change coming. So I just think that Miami's offense, if you looked at their output at NC State, is going to struggle to score more than 14 points. I don't know, and we'll certainly have some updates on game day on Saturday, whether Johnny Wilson and Keon Coleman are going to be back. The Pitt game felt a little bit like it might have been a maintenance game for them, like Travion Henderson's taken a few of those in the last year. So if those dudes are back rolling, the Seminoles are going to score 28 points, 35 points, whatever it is. Miami defense is fine, but it's not elite. So I think we're going to be hearing the tomahawk chop and some echoes of the past in Tallahassee this weekend.
Fun little game in the SEC East. Tennessee, a 1-point favorite at Missouri. This game kicks off at 3:30 p.m. Eastern. Let's go Steve, Pete, and then Rece.
Love this matchup. Really, really fired up to see what happens. We got game day implications on the line. And somebody told me that Tennessee has scored 66, 62, and 35 in the last 3 matchups. This Missouri team is
probably wasn't Blake Baker.
No, it was not. It was not close, but not. I look at this matchup, watching the tape back of Missouri and Georgia. I was really impressed with what Missouri brought to the table on both lines of scrimmage. They hadn't done that in years past, even in Coach Drink's whole tenure. That's where they've, lost it. That's where they've lost these matchups to Tennessee as badly as they have. Those guys are a lot better. He's got some players there. And I like Missouri's approach offensively. Last week against Georgia, you see what they do with formations into the boundary to create matchups on guys that they want. I feel like it's more buttoned up than Tennessee's offensive approach. And this is where you take that next step as a program. And it's getting up off the deck. You're down 27-21 in Athens and you have the ball. Like that's all you could ask for. Unfortunately, you throw an interception, and then that hope is gone. But this is where you get up off the deck and show that you're a better program. You got a foundation, you got players, and you got depth as a program. So I'm going to take Missouri in this game.
I feel like beating Tennessee this year
comes down to a very linear thought, which is a different linear thought than beating Tennessee last year. Beating Tennessee this year comes down to can you stop the run? And Missouri has a very good rush defense. It's 24th in the country. And they have a defense that I feel like has started to play better as the season has gone on. As their offense, I think Steve mentioned earlier, has found some identity. I thought they really used the stretch run play well against Georgia, eat some clock. That's obviously going to be key. Anytime you play Tennessee, you want to play a little takeaway and not let them go tempo down your throat. So I think this could be one of the best games of the weekend. I'm excited to watch it. And I feel like Missouri's got a little juju this year, maybe that they haven't had in past couple of years. You look at that Mevis kick, obviously Harrison Mevis, the 60 whatever yard like that. Those are the type of plays teams that are winning and on rolls make. And look, if Georgia misses I think it was a career long by their freshman kicker field goal, Missouri's got the ball and a chance to go win the darn game in Athens on Saturday. So I thought they played Georgia very well, acquitted themselves very well, and I think they win on Saturday and beat Tennessee.
I expected Georgia to control the game against Missouri last week. So I want to be careful how I phrase this because I think Georgia is significantly better than Missouri. Better team won. I'm not saying that Missouri should have won the game. But based on my expectation of each, I was more impressed with Missouri than Georgia. Doesn't mean I was disappointed in Georgia in the least. I was not. I just didn't expect Missouri to match up as long as they did. I figured they would give them some fight early and then eventually break, and they just never did. Throwing an interception late and not quite getting it done is not breaking. It just didn't happen. They never broke. That showed a remarkable toughness. They've got some dynamic playmakers. They've got good defense. They're good on the corner. And Tennessee has gotten wobbly on the road. Started out well in Tuscaloosa, didn't finish well. Never really got anything going in Gainesville on the road. And this is going to be a tough environment too. And then the big numbers that you mentioned, Steve, I think will allow Missouri to recover quickly from that disappointment last week.
Yeah,
I think Missouri wins the game. And so I'm going to go with the Tigers too.
Next up, I think this is the first appearance we've had Rutgers on the board. Rutgers at Iowa. Iowa, a 1.5 favorite. This kicks off at 3:30 p.m. Eastern time. The total, 28.5. Let's hear it from Pete, Rece, and then Steve.
So are we picking the total or the game?
Might be more
do
fun
whatever
to pick
you
the
want
total.
with this one.
Yeah. So I'm going to pick the total. I saw this stat on social media. I think Matt Fortuna had it, that there have been like 7 Iowa games that have had like 30-ish, like ridiculously low spreads, and the under hit in all of them. So I'm not going to bet against that trend, but I will say this. Gavin Wimsatt has thrown critical, debilitating pick sixes in all of Rutgers' losses this year. All right, including one that turned the game against Ohio State. Like, if you can prop bet a Gavin Wimsatt pick six and a Cooper DeJean pick six, I think that's a wise investment at this point, looking at the histories of both. So I'm going to take the under until the offenses prove otherwise.
I'm going to go Iowa here. I mean, a safety covers it, right? And it's that game in Wrigley last week with the wind blowing in and holding them down to 17, and Rutgers is much improved, and they played their tails off against Ohio State last week. But Pete hit it. You can't be loose with the ball for 1 second against the Iowa defense. So I'll take under the total, and I'll take Iowa continuing its march toward the Big Ten championship game, or preferably some type of 7-way tie. I hope Sicko's committee will let us know that that's still possible in the Big Ten West, and if so, hopefully we'll get that. And I don't care who wins the tiebreaker, but in this particular game, at home, only giving 1.5 points, that means they can just get a safety. They'll be able to cover at some point to make the difference. So I'll take Iowa.
I'm going to take Iowa. I have to admit this shamefully, but like all the great games we had last week at noon, you got A&M, you got Ole Miss, you got Notre Dame, Clemson, Texas, Kansas State. I'm in the hotel and I'm fixated on Ohio State and Rutgers. And the reason I was fixated is they had the perfect game plan to not get blown out in that game and cover the spread against Ohio State. Every single play, they brought down to 3 on the play clock. They executed, and one tip ball, pick six, turns the whole thing around.
How about that fumble Ruski, Steve?
Not to cut you off.
Phenomenal.
One of the great plays of the year.
Yeah, no doubt. And that, with that, they still can't cover. So I just look at the margin for error being that small for Rutgers, and Rece, you touched on it. Whatever you do, Iowa just strains you everything. And Rutgers' offense is not a strength. So I'm going to take Iowa at home. I do see. I feel like if Rutgers were to pull this off, this would be his biggest win since he came back to Piscataway, right?
Yeah.
I mean, they just haven't been able to do it. I mean, multiple teams have gone there, but to be able to go on the road and do it, I think would be a huge win for Rutgers. But I don't see it.
I want to say there was a big pick six in this game
last year. I want to say this game was on Friday night, and we were watching the hotel in Lawrence. Rece, does that sound right?
I do not recall
Friday night game. Yeah. No, there's a lot of results. You are under no obligation to remember every result.
I don't recall that.
And how they have it. They had Rutgers had like 2 rock fights with Nebraska and Iowa that they ended up losing. And anyway, a lot of rock fights in the Big Ten.
Yeah, let's see. I just looked it up. The Iowa last year, Rutgers was 27-10 on the last weekend in September.
But at halftime, it was
close. It was tight then.
That's what I want to say. That game was a game
until there was some debilitating play. Anyway, that is a pod hijacking. So I will put my gun away and let us finish.
The meanderings there and thinking back, and I think it gives people a little insight to how we need to get out more. Because we're all sitting there going, yeah, I tell you what, wait to hear this next one when all of us are going to know something about this one.
Game day headed to Athens. The fellas will be on the scene for Ole Miss playing the Bulldogs. Bulldogs 10.5-point favorite. This kicks off at 7 p.m. Eastern. Let's go Rece, Steve, and then Pete.
Now, see, I foreshadowed, Taylor, because I thought you were going Texas State, Coastal Carolina next, but maybe we'll get to that.
Ooh, you know what?
Maybe we must be getting long. That's like when Jimmy G, the producer on Game Day, gets in my ear and we start fighting during the picks. He's like, I'll use an example from this week. I've got to drop Texas State and Coastal Carolina. You can't drop that game. We teased it. I've got to drop something. Well, don't drop anything. I'll tell them to be quick. Anyway, we go back and forth on all that. So I'll be tight for you, Taylor, on Ole Miss and Georgia. I think Lane's done a great job with his team. I've really been a big fan of Jackson Dart since he was at USC, and I'm pleased to see the way he's come along. I I figure that there will be I think we said this on Wednesday, a trunk full of funk from Lane for his old coordinator buddy at Alabama, Kirby Smart.
Save that for Saturday.
He might catch him with a blindside block, figuratively speaking, here and there, and get a couple in. But I think Georgia wins and covers. I'm going to take the dogs. I think they've answered the bell against Missouri. They're probably the most talented team. Ohio State's very talented as well. So is Michigan. So are Washington and Oregon. But Georgia's probably the most talented team. Carson Beck keeps making plays. They run the ball when they have to. They find receivers when they need to. And I just don't see in that environment on a Saturday night, even though Ole Miss has had a solid season, didn't do much offensively against Alabama long time ago, but a very similar defense in terms of body types, skill, depth, all of that. Long time ago, time for both to improve. But I'm going to say that that Georgia pulls away in this one and covers with relative ease.
Who do you guys think is better quarterback, Brady Cook or Jackson Dart?
Jackson Dart.
Beat.
Jackson Dart's a better quarterback. Brady
Cook may be having a better season. How's that for splitting the hairs?
I agree. And when I look at this matchup and going back again, watching Missouri, I love their plan and how they attack things. And when you mentioned all the funk that Lane's going to bring, Rece, Lane doesn't get enough credit for how sophisticated his offense is. When I talk about that is with the run game. He does so many things to create matchups for his blockers because he doesn't have the 5-star offensive lineman. And he doesn't get enough credit for that. And obviously, when he gets in these big spots, it doesn't go well. So those things compound each other. But I really feel the same way about this game that I did with Missouri. I don't think Ole Miss can win the game, but I truly believe they have the goods to hang around in this game. Georgia's defense, as good as they are, I mean, that 23, Tyke Smith is playing like a maniac. That guy is all over the place. Love watching him, but I still feel like they're gettable to an extent. So I'm taking Ole Miss with the points there.
So I've learned over the years, you can tell because I'm 20 games below 500 in my picks, that it's never smart to pick on a coach or a program to completely change what they have been, right? Like Ole Miss has been just not quite good enough. Lane has been not quite good enough in these big games to topple them. And I don't think this Ole Miss team is going to be the one that changes like the archetype of what Ole Miss has been. So I'm going to take Georgia. I'm going to take the points, and I'm going to take Georgia to cover the 10.5. I just don't think Ole Miss or Lane Kiffin has evolved to the point where they can beat Georgia. And at that point, I think Georgia's offense will be able to march up and down the field. I think Georgia's offense, especially their pass game, has been a little bit underrated this year. Like they've been very dynamic in that. Like this isn't like some Saban team from 2010 or whatever that's just like hammered into the A gap. Like they are dynamic, they are explosive, they are efficient, and I think they are powerful enough on each line to wear Ole Miss down and win this game by 2 touchdowns.
I'm curious to see if
Taylor,
Georgia scores 40.
Yeah.
That's
a couple quick caveats on this game that I just want to get out ahead of just in case, right? If Ole Miss wins the game, then they're going to have a compelling college football playoff case potentially on the final Sunday, assuming no further stumbles, because they are still unlikely to go to the SEC championship game, and Alabama would go. So they would be sitting there 11-1, one loss at Alabama, victory against Georgia, potentially a victory over the SEC champion, Georgia Bulldogs, same number of losses and a head-to-head victory. Their case gets quite interesting if they are able to pull this upset. Not just interesting. I mean, it comes down to really, I think, how good you think they are and how much you're going to reward winning a single game on a Saturday in November as opposed to winning the conference championship. And I'm still not exactly sure whether it would be better for Ole Miss's case for Georgia to win the SEC or for Alabama. I think Georgia, because they beat them and it would eliminate Alabama. I think that would be best. But the flip side of it is if Alabama won it, it would eliminate Georgia too. So I still doubt they make it, but it certainly will be. They'll be in the mix on that final Sunday if they're able to win and not stumble after this.
We don't root for teams, but I think we all like chaos a little bit. Boy, hotty toddy if you like chaos.
Yes, yep, for sure.
One more potential chaotic game here. Maybe Pac-12 after dark, USC at Oregon. Oregon a 16.5-point favorite. Again, 10:30 p.m. Eastern time kick. Let's go, Steve, Pete, and then Rece.
I'm not overthinking this. I'm laying the points with Oregon. They're better at every facet of the game. Maybe their quarterback is not as talented, but that system is more consistent and reliable for me at home. I don't know what the mindset's going to be of SC. No more defense coordinator. You look at the road ahead, Rece, you've pointed out multiple times. What are we going to get? It's not a long road, I'll tell you that. It's coming to a halt pretty quickly. So I with all that Oregon has to come or has to play for moving forward, them knowing that I think is the difference of them keeping the focus. So I'm going to lay them with the Ducks.
I'm going to overthink it. It's a lot of points for Caleb Williams, and Oregon isn't built to score 50. Now, again, they did against Portland State and a few other teams, but I think USC can still score against Oregon's very good defense. I still have memories of Oregon's secondary getting filleted by Michael Penix, and I believe Caleb Williams and his receivers, although the receivers aren't in the same category as Washington's receivers. They didn't have McMillan that day for very long. So I just feel like USC is going to be able to move the ball. Caleb is going to be able to move the ball. There is a last stand element to this game that I think is going to be important here. And so I'm not going to talk myself into USC winning, but I do think this will be a game into the third quarter, which would allow USC to be comfortable to cover.
I am really torn on this because I think Oregon's good enough to win the national championship. And since we were on the subject of Lane Kiffin and big games, Lane Kiffin's biggest win at USC was probably the upset at Oregon in 2011. He gave Chip Kelly his first loss at Autzen Stadium. Ducks were number 4, kind of, took any hope they had of getting into that BCS picture away and finished them. And, while Lane has his opportunity, USC has a similar type stage against Oregon. And, should remind ourselves also that if USC wins this game and then beats UCLA, the other results in the Pac-12 are likely to form, to shake out so that SC would make it to the Pac-12 title game. Now, that's not a lock. There are some tiebreaker scenarios, but the most logical and the favored results would likely put them in the Pac-12 title game if they win. I don't think they're good enough to win. I'm on defense especially. I also wonder if they can protect Caleb Williams because we saw people getting to them. Oregon's been very good at pressuring the quarterback. I think they're top 15 in the country in sacks. Man, it just seems like a lot of points. This is one of the quintessential Pepto games. I don't know if they've quit. I suspect they haven't. I like Oregon. I might end up picking Oregon to win the whole freaking thing at the end. But with that quarterback and those receivers, and you got to figure a few busts here and there, I'm going to sort of hold my nose and take the points. I'm really hesitant to do so, but I'm going to take the 16.5 and go with the Trojans.
How about 73.5 over under?
Yeah. It's, that number's bigger than I expected. Steve earlier asked a question, what the number would be for me to take Penn State or for us to take Penn State. And I said it was about 8.5. The number's 4.5. If you ask the same question here, what would the number need to be for me to lay it with the Ducks? It's only a couple points down from that. Probably 13.5 for sure, and maybe 14.5. But you get up to that one little extra possession, I'm gonna take the points, but I will be stunned if USC wins the game. But I'm gonna take the big number.
That's all we got, fellas.
So you just ditched poor old GJ Kenny getting off to a mercurial start in his coaching career, an electric one, riding a rocket ship, giving one at Coastal Carolina, where they are going to win, led by TJ Finley, the former LSU and Auburn quarterback. I'm going Texas State. I just had to get that in there for our guy GJ. That's all, because you blew right past it because you're so upset about the Maryland pick. I really believe that, Taylor.
Really, it has to be hard to be a Maryland fan,
Maryland football fan.
Oof.
It'd be hard.
It's the absolute worst existence. I wouldn't wish it on anyone. And honestly, my wife is an Alabama fan, so I kind of slide over to that end of things. The family was over on Saturday. We're fist pumping watching Alabama LSU. So that's where I'm at.
It's kind of an interesting thing because they're. I'm not going to out one of our colleagues, but he has a similar situation, not with Alabama, but with another team that's perennially in the limelight. And that is not his allegiance. It is his wife. And he sort of fakes it, but he is secretly delighted every time that power brand gets their I dotted, if you get the reference right there. He's secretly delighted by it, but feigns support of semi-feigned support of people who like to fight that team across the field. So it's interesting that you actually say that you root
rely on my wife watching Syracuse and seeing them win, because it would be pretty dark around here.
Is your wife a Syracuse alum also?
Yeah, Kate went to Syracuse too. So
okay, all right.
When we met, she didn't know how to pronounce Boeheim,
so that really probably tells you about where her fandom is. So
did she call him Bohemian? How did she pronounce it?
I don't remember, but it wasn't Boeheim. Bohemian.
Well, the other thing too, the other thing that would be delightful and much to Jim's chagrin would be is she went to Syracuse and was completely unaware of his existence.
No, she kind of knew he was
like there was always some controversy up there. So, I don't remember which one it was. Which one was the time? Jim's our colleague now, so we have to make sure we keep things buttoned up.
I'm a big fan. He's a lot of fun. He's not as miserable as he tries to make his outward appearance seem. He's actually a delightful
he's a funny guy. And
he's very smart.
He's a very funny guy.
Yeah.
He'll be great. He'll be great with us for sure. Guys, it was a pleasure. Taylor, thank you for wading through this. We encourage you to subscribe to the podcast. And by the way, we should have mentioned if news comes on Michigan, we'll be back to give you like a little emergency update, whether, if it were to come down that Jim Harbaugh is not coaching in that game. So never fear. I don't think it's going to affect my pick at all, but it might the other guys, and we'll certainly get you up to date on that if conditions warrant. This has been the College Game Day Podcast. I urge you to subscribe or download it where you prefer to get podcasts. Before we go, we have another interview from our friend Jen Lada inside the Mercedes-Benz ESPN College Football Podcast Sprinter down in Athens. This interview is brought to you by the Mercedes-Benz ESPN College Football Podcast Sprinter, coming soon to a game near you. Visit mbvans.com/sprinterlabs to learn more.
All right, this conversation is coming from our custom ESPN College Football Sprinter van and is presented by Mercedes-Benz. I'm Jen Lada, so lucky today to be joined by Elle Duncan, who is a SportsCenter anchor extraordinaire, but so talented in a number of ways, including Elle. I've always loved how tapped in to college football you are. I know you're an unabashed Georgia fan.
Did you see why I was doing that? Because I was going to start barking, and then I was like, oh, Jen's being professional. Let me not.
You know what? If you want to bring out the bark, I have no problem with that.
Go dogs!
So let's begin with this. We are here in Athens today, getting ready for College Game Day. How confident are Georgia fans about a three-peat with this squad?
Okay, so I'm experiencing something I've never experienced in my whole entire life as Georgia fandom, and that is level-headed Georgia fans. And I'm like, what is wrong with y'all? We're supposed to be irrational and crazy and panicky. I think that confidence. I think that this feels like as good a year as any, because some of the teams that we have come to depend on being the biggest hindrances to Georgia repeating are having a little bit of a down year. Like, I know Alabama is rebounding and they're playing their best football, and it looks like we're streaking to see them in the SEC championship. But I think some of the other teams that we felt incredibly confident about, like an Ohio State or even facing a Michigan, which we've already done in the playoffs, and we see what happens. Ohio State concerns me a little bit. The idea that they've got a really balanced offense and defense. I think before you sort of would expect from the Big Ten that you're going to see a lot of points put up, but that the SEC's physicality is still just unmatched. And that feels like it's evening out a little bit. So I would say the confidence meter for most Georgia fans is really excited that we've won 2, but not a ton of pressure, Jen. Like, nobody's won 3, right, since the Leatherhead days. So I don't think that there's pressure, but certainly it feels like there is an opportunity if we can get through this gauntlet. And then, of course, if we can beat Bama. It always comes down to beating Bama.
So it sounds like part of you is like, we've already won 2, so this is kind of gravy at this point, right? This would be a cherry on top of an incredible sundae that y'all have created over the last couple of seasons. But this team is really good still. Yeah. I mean, one of the top defenses in the country, obviously, from a scoring defense standpoint. They've got one of the best offenses in the SEC, I think averaging almost 39 points per game. So it does feel like all of the pieces that have been there in past years are there again. You're just saying it depends on what everybody else does.
Yeah, I also think too, though, Jen, is that we all know that there's such a thing as style points. And when Georgia is on the precipice, or at least trying to do something that even Bama has never done, because let's be honest, I can troll Tide all I want, and of course I always will, but everyone is chasing what they've done. The ability to not just get to the top, but to stay there. Nobody's been more relevant over the last 20 years than Alabama. If we are looking to take that next step and be that next dynastic program like people are saying that we are, style points matter. And so despite the fact that, yes, we have an incredibly efficient offense, despite the fact that our defense is amongst the best in the SEC, we just haven't had that statement, punch somebody good in the mouth, Florida doesn't count, and convince everybody, including the playoff committee, that they are the undisputed number 1 team. And it just feels like for a team that's won 25 straight games, there's still so many question marks out there for people. So yes, I do still think that we control our own destiny. I do still think that this team, if they're playing at their best, if Brock Bowers gets back, if they can figure out some of the issues they've got on their run defense, they're still a better, more talented team than Alabama is, despite how good Alabama's defense is. But yeah, I'm waiting to see if over the next couple of weeks, whether it be Ole Miss or Tennessee, I'm hoping that they can have one of those statement type of games that makes everybody feel a little bit more comfortable, because we just haven't seen it yet. And I like that. I like the idea that they're sort of spinning this into, we've been losing in 5 of our 6 SEC games and we remain undefeated. We handle adversity, we handle it well, we're resilient, and we're tough. I'm hoping that ultimately will help them in the playoffs.
And the goal, of course, is to be playing your best football during the playoff portion of the season, not necessarily at the beginning. One of the things that Georgia has to overcome is brain drain, and that is when they take coaches who have been successful at a program and they start going to other places. Dan Lanning is a perfect example of that, and what he is doing out at Oregon. What do you make of the Pac-12 this year in their final year of existence, making a statement?
Listen, we actually are experiencing this in women's basketball too, where it's the Pac-12 is we are going out with a damn bang. I mean, these teams are, I talked about sort of when you handicap the playoffs over the last few years, you can sort of speak in generalities when it comes to some of these conferences and go, this is what's going to happen, right? We've only had one Pac-12 team make it in this current CFP format. That was Washington. They got boat race, and that's always the thing, right? It's Pac-12 is going to put up a bunch of numbers, but their defense is trash. And once these SEC teams but that argument is gone, because Dan Lanning has brought the same kind of approach out there that he had in Georgia, and it's really scary. Now, I do still think that there's a certain element of people, especially if an SEC team faces them, that are going to go, we kind of know what Bo Nix does. He was here, he was one of us, we understand. But I do think that because the Pac-12 is so good, that they are now making it to where a team like Georgia cannot fail, right? How many times are we having this conversation right now where we're sort of looking at the outlook and we say, if Georgia does make it to the SEC championship and they face Alabama and they somehow lose, because of what the Pac-12 has done, they're not going to be able to sneak in like in years past. They're not going to have the benefit of the doubt of saying, yeah, but you're playing in the SEC. The Pac-12 has kind of become that this year. We're playing each other, and sort of cannibalizing themselves has put them in a really position of power. And it kind of sucks, because it felt like for so many years the Pac-12 was so incredibly irrelevant, which is why all of these teams wanted to leave. And now they're one of the most irrelevant conferences rather. So it seems a little bit sad. It's like that last rally before you die. I think they've talked about that before, where all of a sudden when you're sick and you feel really, really great. And that kind of feels like what we're headed for with the Pac-12 a little bit. But yeah, they're playing great. And we'll see. They still have to play in the CFP. We'll see. I still like my SEC defense over theirs. We'll see.
And we didn't even talk about Washington, which is the undefeated team, as they beat Oregon. I know that teams from the Big Ten are watching the season going, oh, darn. Like, these guys who are coming in, they may actually be some powerhouses that they have to contend with going forward. So we'll see how all of that shakes out.
I love that too, Jen, by the way. Like, I love the idea that a lot of these teams that are coming to new conferences have went ahead and had sort of a statement. Like, when they decided to add a Texas to the SEC, I'm like, it makes sense. It makes sense geographically. We sort of align, we align. But at the same time, we don't need more okay teams in the SEC. Like, give me some damn competition. And what Texas was able to do this year in beating Bama was such a statement game to the rest of the SEC. What Oklahoma was able to do in beating Texas was a statement game. And the same thing with Washington. So I think, we're sort of seeing these teams go, you think that we're just sort of like fleeing a bad conference and that we're just trying to find shelter wherever we can, but we are coming in with a chip on our shoulder and we're ready to contribute right away.
All right, college football playoffs obviously coming up in about 5 or 6 weeks. We keep seeing now the rankings show every Tuesday night. You can watch that on ESPN with Rece Davis holding court with the guys. Who are your top 4 teams right now, and will it be different at the end of the year?
Okay, my top 4 teams right now, I'll start at number 4. I'm going to give it to Florida State. Listen, it hasn't always been pretty, but they've done everything that they've been asked to do, and they've stepped up in every single moment that they have been asked to step in. Number 3, I'm still going to give it to Michigan. That could change even after today, right? Like, we don't really know what's going to happen the rest of the way, but as of right now, how they're currently constructed, Michigan is my number.
You view Michigan differently if Jim Harbaugh is not on the sideline?
100%. Not just if he's not on the sideline. It 100% depends if, and again, this is all conjecture and speculation, but let's just say, for the purposes of this, that he is suspended. There is a huge difference between being suspended from games, like he was at the beginning of the year, and suspended from the program. If you are not even allowed to be at practice, that dramatically changes that Ohio State game. I'm sorry, it does. And so, yes, I would absolutely handicap their chances at less than great if he's not on the sideline or not in the facility over the next 3 weeks. We'll see. As of now, they're still my number 3 team. I'm going to give Ohio State number 2. I know I sound like I'm being a homer, but they tried to lose to Rutgers. I'm sorry. They had an opportunity, newly minted number 1 team in the country, to make people feel confident that they should a statement game, and they tried to lose to Rutgers. And I understand what Georgia did with Missouri wasn't pretty, but Missouri was a top 12 team, an SEC team, and they ultimately were never really at risk of losing that game. Like, they still had full command of that game. And of course, I'm going to give Georgia the number 1. For the brand.
We can't blame her for that, can we, folks?
Come on, man.
Last thing I have for you, because you've been so fantastic. I love the depth of knowledge that you bring to the college football conversation. What do you love most about college football? Because I know you are fans of some of the other Atlanta teams. You have some other allegiances from other times in the country as well. But you love college football.
I do.
What is it that really...
Tradition. I'm sentimental, I'm nostalgic, and it feels like those are... I just love football in general. I love NFL football as well, but there's just something about college football Saturdays. There's something about every single team sort of having this thing, this galvanizing thing. And it's always funny, Jen, because people be like, wait, did you go to Georgia? I'm like, I didn't go to Georgia. But that's what's so beautiful, especially about like the South and with college football. You don't have to go to that team for that team to belong to you. And if you are from Georgia, then the Bulldogs are your team. Now, if you go to Georgia Tech, then it becomes that. Or if you go somewhere else, but you are born into this fandom and it means something. And we all come from different walks of life, depending on what city you're in Georgia alone. We're all incredibly different. But every Saturday we find a way to put all that aside and come together and wear the same colors. And there's just something so incredibly profound about that, and I just love so much that college football is at the basis of that. So I keep looking around and like remembering some of these very same bars that my feet were sticking to when I was 17 and 18 years old, sneaking into these bars in Athens, and there's just so many incredible memories that you just don't have in the same way that you do for NFL games.
Unfortunately for you, statute of limitations and whatnot.
Correct. It wasn't me.
Just a lookalike.
Yeah. It was
she
just
is Elle Duncan. We are so lucky to have her here. This conversation from our custom ESPN college football Sprinter van is presented by Mercedes-Benz. Thanks, Elle.